Hello, welcome to Saturday Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I'm interrupting my regular booktube channel here to talk about a very special book, which is my own book. If you have watched my channel, you'll likely have some awareness that book one of the Burnt Ship Trilogy, Escaping First Contact, is coming out today! Yay! I am so excited to introduce you to the super fun collection of aliens and Terrans who inhabit the universe that I created. If you want some more info about my writing process, the characters, and the world, keep watching. But first, the important stuff. You can find the book for $2.99 on Kindle. It's available on Kindle Unlimited as well, and you can buy it in print from Amazon for $13.99. I wanted to sell it for $9.99, but Amazon wouldn't let me, so sorry about that. I don't know. I'm not in this for the money anyway, but for, the validation of my art. No, I would write anyway, even if everybody hated it. But anyway, it would be nice to have people enjoy my story. Unfortunately, because it's on Kindle Unlimited, I can't sell it on Kobo or Apple or Google Books. But, mid next year, I'm going to take it off Kindle Unlimited, so it'll be available then. I'm also working on doing an audiobook, but that might not be until January or later, and I have no definitive date on that. So hopefully soon. So thank you so much to everybody who has pre-ordered the ebook, those of you who are going to order the paperback, and those of you who are waiting on a review copy. They should be coming your way soon. Thank you so much. I so much appreciate it. It's just nice to, have people willing to give it a chance. If you do a review, on BookTube or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I would love it if you use the hashtags I created for it, which is Escaping First Contact, the Burnt Ship Trilogy, and Nostromo Publications. This is so I can see, your post. I have pretty thick skin though, so even if you do read the novel and you aren't a fan, that's fine. I'd still like to see a review, and please throw one on Amazon. Even if just a star rating is helpful. When you get to 50 reviews, Amazon starts auto-promoting it, so that would be great. Okay, so I'm basically just going to get into the writing process now. If you find that interesting, that's cool. If you want to skip ahead to a kind of like a preview of the characters in the world, then you can jump to here. So anyway, my writing process. Escaping First Contact, or EFC as I call it, came into being when I was reading this novel called Vector Analysis. Where is it? It's right here. Vector Analysis, this book about scientists trapped in a space station undergoing this mind-altering disease. So my novel is actually nothing like that, but I thought, while I was reading it, I thought, what would it be like for someone to stumble onto that station years later and find, all the skeletons, but also wonder what had happened. And that kind of made the idea form in my head for this book. I also love horror sci-fi like Event Horizon, Alien, and Virus, the 90s movie, which feature kind of weird alien derelict ships. So that was part of the inspiration as well. And a lot of video games that I play have derelict ships as a level in the game. And I always really liked those levels. So, a side note about Vector Analysis, I found out that Penguin Random House owned the rights to this book after, I guess, whoever this was, Ace, sold it to them. And I wanted to use a line from the book in my epigraph, which is the little quote at the start of the book. And so I, filled out their form, blah, blah, blah. They got back to me and said, oh, we don't actually own the rights. It's this small little agency in the UK. Here's their contact information. So I went to their website. They only had a fax number. I don't have a fax. I don't have a printer. So I asked my sister, to print out the page and fax it for me, because she lives right next door to a printing place, I guess. And she had to do it twice because the first time didn't work. And then they never responded. So 2 weeks later, I was like, fine. So, I got off my millennial ass and I buckled down and I called them and I was like, hey, can I send you a request for this copyright request? And they were like, yeah, sure. Here's our email address. Emailed them and she responded. Emailed 3 more times. She responded, but she never actually gave me permission. She just kind of kept ghosting me. So I was like, fine. So I gave up. I picked a different epigraph from, Ozymandias by, Percy Bysshe Shelley, because it kind of fits. I also wanted to, it was annoying because I had 2 days to decide this. I should have been thinking about this earlier, but I assumed because she was emailing me back that she would actually give me permission, or at least give me some notification about this. Anyway, I assumed wrong. Never assume, as they say. So I was also picking between that quote about machinery from As I Lay Dying from Faulkner, or I also really like the poem The Convergence of the Twain by Thomas Hardy, but the themes in that didn't really work, so the Ozymandias one actually makes more sense. So anyway, My novel is heavily inspired by Alan Dean Foster, Tanya Huff, and the 90s Alien vs. Predator books. I love all of these books. And what I love so much about them is the rich alien cultures that these books just have. And I tried my hardest to create my alien species that are close enough to humans that our interactions with them would seem plausible, but are also different enough from humans that it seems that it's interesting. I think there's kind of two ways, maybe three ways to approach alien cultures in novels. One is to presuppose that all aliens are too incongruous, I can't talk, to really be understandable, and another is to make them physically and culturally different from us, but still familiar, if that makes sense. Mine is definitely more like the latter. I posit in the novel that the aliens we interact with all look like us, to a lesser or greater degree. They're bipedal, they have one mouth, they have two hands, digits on their hands, etc., like that. But they have different kind of types of skin, or they have different other kind of evolved features based on convergent evolution. So this is kind of like the idea, like, how all fish kind of on our planet, even if they're from different oceans and lakes, like, that have different compositions, all kind of look like fish. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea behind that similar environments create similar looking species. Anyway, that's my reason. I also love the concept of space marines. I love military science fiction. I don't read a ton of it. A lot of it can be a bit dated, so I'm kind of picky as to the ones that I read. But I really like, Tanya Huff's The Space Marines, and so that's kind of where that comes from. Also, I love Starship Troopers, like the movie, not the book. I'm not a Heinlein fan. Anyway, I love writing action scenes, so there's lots of fighting in this. There's lots of cool guns, and there's fun tech and space battles. There's a forbidden romance, which you had to expect. If you watch my channel, you know that I always have a weird crush on one of the characters in the book, and so, of course, there's a forbidden romance in this. And I really hope my sense of humor hits home for those that share my kind of humor, and that those who don't aren't put off by it. I'm very fond of banter amongst characters, insult-based humor and absurdity. So there's a lot of that. In fact, I say the book is a lot funnier than I expected or intended, and I'm very happy with that because I think it's a lot of fun. I'd say the book is like 14A in terms of violence, language. There's lots of F-bombs from one character and sexual situations. There's a lot of talk about alien reproductive systems, a subject that I personally find fascinating. So I've included a lot of that. So just I guess a content warning? I don't know. I had a lot of fun writing this book. How did I keep all these aliens and characters straight? Well, I started off with this notebook. So it says Mystery Ship because that was kind of what I was calling it in my files. Like, I always have like a weird name for it. And so basically I started off with just like notes, and I've just got notes and notes and notes, and these are just ideas that I had. And then eventually when I got to a certain point, I started putting the notes in a more organized manner, and then I used this as a reference guide when I was writing the books, and then I plotted the actual plot. So first I developed the alien cultures, and then from that I already had the idea in my mind that they would be on this derelict ship, but first I planned out what the aliens were like, and then how these would interact with one another to create kind of the situations that would happen. And then as they travel through the ship, that happened more naturally. I'm not really a plotter. I was a lot more plotter in this book than I was definitely for What Branches Grow, definitely for other stories that I've written. In the fact that because it's a trilogy, I wanted it all to be consistent. I guess this story is a bit of a mix between like an organically created kind of pantser way and like a plotting. So it's a bit of both. Anyway, once I got the books written down, I then made these charts. And these charts are my tracking charts. So when I was self-editing my own books, I would use these charts to make sure that everything was consistent. So I kept forgetting things. I'd forget how to spell, like, someone's last name, because there's a lot of weird alien words. I forget how old people were, or like, I'd forget things like, what arm did they hurt in that battle? That kind of stuff. And yeah, these are Paw Patrol pictures that I stole from my daughter. Apparently there's something wrong with Chase in this picture. Anyway, and then, so that was like for the plot. And then in terms of character arcs, so I had another chart. I don't know where it went, but basically I gave each character 3 goals. Or 3 arcs, or 3 kind of plots. So the main overarching plot for all of them is get out of the ship. And then their second kind of character arc had to deal with something personal, and so did their third. The second was kind of something that affected the main plot, like someone's indecision has, affects kind of their ability to do this, or the marital issues between 2 of the characters is causing a bit of tension between the group, something like that. And then the third kind of goal or arc is kind of like how they internalize these things and how they turn out differently in the end, And I really wanted to make it that none of these people had a secret or like an arc that was like over the top or like dramatic. Most of the things that people are dealing with are everyday average things. Like one character is dealing with recently being broken up with, and another character is dealing with kind of their place in their society now that things have shifted. Like it's more personal things like that. I wanted it to be that these are 8 normal people. It's just 6 of them happen to be aliens. So anyway, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I really hope that, you find the characters interesting and fascinating. And now I'm going to jump into kind of like who they are. I thought it would be kind of fun to give you guys a preview into the characters, and there's not going to be no spoilers. It's just kind of an introduction. Okay, so first I'm going to talk a little bit of the species that they're in, because you have to understand that before I tell you the characters. So first we have the Terrans. Obviously, these are humans from Terra, from Earth. They have spread out into the galaxy, colonizing many planets. They don't always get along, but there's no kind of Earth civil war happening here. The year is, I think it's 2260. I can't remember. It might be 22. No, it's not 2210. Anyway, whatever. I can't remember the actual words. A couple hundred years in the future. So we have faster than light technology, which we did not invent. We actually got it from one of the other species. And spaceships are powered by impulse engines that run on like nuclear power, and superlumen, which I don't really get into, but it's a warp drive. It's not a hard sci-fi at all. So it's basically, we have a superlumen engine. Turn it on, we will go faster than light. That's basically how it goes. Another alien species that we talk to are the Strenoi. So these are reptilioid species that are the closest to us in appearance than all the other ones. So they're slightly taller than us on average. They have similar builds, but it's actually the reverse. The women tend to be beefier than the men, and that's just a small difference. They have similar organs. They don't have any ears. They just have like flaps they can open and close. They have bigger mouths than us. They have sharper teeth. They have claws, and they have like scale-like skin. They also have a claw on their back feet like a velociraptor. That curved, what's it called? There's a certain word for that. Anyway, there's a certain word for that claw that they have. And anyway, that because Terra and Strenoi were having a war, the Space Marines were starting to call the Strenoi raptors as like an insult, kind of. But yeah, so they're the kind of classic honor-obsessed aliens that we see in a lot of movies and games. They're expansionists, but for materials, not for exploration. They're not very imaginative as like a culture, and they're harboring a major crisis on their home planet that comes about more in book 2 and book 3. And so, as I said, Terra and Strenoi were Terra and Strenovas. That's their main planet. They have just come out of a 10-year war, and the peace treaty between them and the other 2 aliens that I'm going to talk about in a second is called the Accord. Obviously, the treaty, whatever. It's called the Accord, and they call themselves the Accord species because they're part of it. And, the war was over the most basic of things, like, land rights and taxation. The boring stuff. It's funny, as I was thinking about that, I was like, everyone kind of makes fun of, like, Star Wars Episode 1 because, like, the whole thing is about, like, treaties and stuff, but I'm like, that is actually what people get into wars about. Then we have another alien species called the Piran. So it kind of comes from piranha because they're kind of fish-like people. They're basically like the nerds of the galaxy, and they sell their technology to Terrans and Strenoi. I mean, not everybody on the planet is like an engineer or a scientist. They're just more technologically advanced for us in general, so they tend to sell their stuff to us. So as I said, they're piscine aliens, so they're kind of like Admiral Akbar. They can breathe both air and water, and they're physically weaker than humans. They only go about maybe 4.5 feet tall, and they're a bit haughty. And but they have these tendrils that come out of their wrists here and here, and they use those to communicate with emotive gestures because they can't really smile or make any expressions other than a frown. So this allows for them to communicate underwater as well as communicate. So like, for example, if they're angry, their tendrils will be going like this, even though their face is just like that. So that's kind of an interesting. That was a really kind of fun way to write an alien species, and I hope that people find that really interesting. Another of the Accord species is the Dirge. Not too much is known about them. They're cow-headed, bare-bodied aliens. They look like they're supposed to be just kind of big, beefy fighters. They're actually the most technologically advanced and scientifically advanced than all the other species in the galaxy. And because due to a biological weapon, they sterilize their entire species. So every single one of them is a clone. And I found that really interesting concept, and that's why I included that. And yeah, they kind of keep it themselves for the most part, and they're a little different. They're interesting. The last of the species I will talk about is the Rips. They're Ripleyognos is their full name. Everyone calls them the Rips, and they're a recently discovered kind of pre-spacefaring species, and they were basically hired on as mercenaries to be used as cannon fodder by the Terrans and the Strenoi during their war. They are not happy about this. They're not happy about being treated as barely sapient, because now that, they've seen the rest of the galaxy, they've seen space travel, stuff like that, they want it too. And the Accord species are kind of like, yeah, stay on your planet, but, they want more. What's interesting about the Rips is that they're hermaphrodites that reproduce via kind of a variant of parthenogenesis, and they use a gender neutral pronoun E. It's JE, actually, and they live this nomadic life on their hostile planet. So they're very different from the other species. All the other species, except for the Dirge, they used to reproduce in the same manner as us, but and the Piran actually don't. They reproduce a different way. They reproduce like fish with eggs in it. Whatever. I'm not going to get into that right now. Anyway, the Rips are positively terrifying in appearance. They're like Slender Man, if you remember that. Meets like a cat with like angler fish teeth. And their skin is very, very strong and hardy and very shiny, almost metallic. They're replaced. And their feet are really interesting because they have like regular legs that taper down, but then instead of toes and feet, they have these like thousands of little cilia that like move around constantly, and they either float along just kind of like, which is really creepy, or they like walk kind of on them too. They're really interesting, and they have these 3 skin tones. So they have like a bright red, like a cherry red. They have like a shiny black, almost like tar, and then they have like a silver. So and then they have eyes and claws that the claws and the eyes always match, but they don't have to be the same color as the skin. So that's kind of where the variety comes from. They're all muscle, and they're about 7 feet tall on average, and they're very thin because they don't eat complex carbs. They only eat like proteins and other derivatives. So they're scary. Okay, so that's the species basically. So I'm actually going to give you a bit of a little introduction into the characters, just very, very briefly, just to see if you're interested in them. So I would say they're all kind of the main characters, because this book is about 8 or 9 different point of views. It's all third person, but it follows each person per chapter, and I tell you at the start of the chapter who we're kind of following. Anyway, so they're all main characters. I would say that Kosa, whom I'm going to talk about first, is kind of like the main character for me, but that's just because she's human and female, and I'm human and female, so maybe that's why. I would say all of them are equally the main characters. So the first person we have is Kosa. That's her nickname. Her real name is Koharu Saito. She's a badass Marine corporal who takes absolutely no shit from anyone. Her fierceness is only matched by her loyalty to her team. She's an homage a little bit to Machiko Noguchi from Alien vs. Predator, just a little bit, as well as Jade Darcy from Jade Darcy and the Affair of Honor, another book that I really love. She comes from this planet that was colonized by Japanese refugees after a tidal wave struck it in 2147. So she lives on a colony world, and she also has she has some hobbies that you wouldn't think of for a Space Marine. She used to be a dancer, a competitive dancer, and she absolutely loves royalty. Like, she loves the royal wedding and things like that, because apparently that's still happening 200 years from now. Anyway, our other human character is Rami Delaney. He's a sweetheart of a guy who is great with a gun, but he's just kind of the glue that kind of holds the team together, because he's very amiable. He doesn't like to kind of cause waves. He can't make a decision for the life of him. He's a Canadian, so that's a little homage to kind of my country. And he's a really nice guy, and that I just like him. He's just like a normal man. He's I think he's like 24. He is doing time in the Space Marines because he's using the money to pay for his education. He's currently a PhD candidate, and he's doing classical mechanics. So he's smart. And then we have Clenny. Clenny, that's a nickname because their names are very long, these Piran. And so she's a Piran navigator who's optimistic and friendly, but she's a bit of an adrenaline junkie and a bit of a people pleaser and somewhat naive and shy. So she has these kind of two sides to her personality where she can get feisty, but most of the time she's very kind of calm and like kind of in the background. Then we have Pfluger. He's also a Piran. He's a doctor, and he's a surly bastard. No one likes him except for my editor. And he's married to Clenny, and they have a bit of marital tension going on because of fertility issues, which I thought was an interesting thing to put on a different species. So then we have Crankleost. He's a Strenai pilot who worries far too much about what people think. He needs to just calm down about that. He's impetuous and disgruntled a little bit at the start. He's from kind of a low high class, so he struggles kind of with his position in society as well. He's a bit of he's not a loner, but he's a bit kind of neglected in terms of like social if he doesn't have little friends, you know. Anyway, I love him. And then we have Aulant. So she's a Stranoy professor of genetics who discovers something very interesting about Terran and Stranoy's shared history. So she's currently under watch by her government. She's older, and you know, she's very sure of herself. She's married. She has a wife named Korkala back home, but her main deal in this book is probably the one that's the most tied to kind of worldly events. Or universal events, galactic events, I guess. So we have these two Rip characters who use a different non-binary pronoun, so I'm going to use that here, and if that bothers you, well, I don't know if you'll like the book because there's a lot of it, and I don't apologize for that. So we have Stairs, the short form. So Stairs is a Rip who is either bored all the time or completely energetic. He has no ability to be calm. He's always causing trouble, and he has a very elevated opinion of herself, makes Harley Quinn look absolutely sane. So that's Stairs. Stairs is one of my favorite characters to write. Then we have Wind. Wind is a Rip. He's a sniper. He keeps to himself. He doesn't say a lot. So and then there's three other characters, Hind, Gurkly, and Renault, but I don't know who they are. You'll have to read to find out who they are. Okay, so that's basically the end of the my little preview here. Hopefully you found that intriguing and interesting. I just want to say again, my cover artist is John Stubbington, and he did a fantastic job. He is so helpful. I can't wait to do a cover reveal next month of book 2 because the second book is gorgeous. And yeah. Yeah, so I hope you check it out, and I hope you like it. And if you don't, that's totally fine. But if you do, I'm very happy. I'd be very happy. So thanks.